Hello, welcome to the Self-Learning Podcast by Dr. Sushma Singh. Let us start discussion on Unit 7, Structure, Function and Neo-Functionalism. And we are continuing our topic, the thesis of Neo-Functionalism. Like structural functionalism, Neo-Functionalism retains interest in integration, but it is not an accomplished fact. Rather, it is a social possibility. It recognizes that the deviance is a obligate social reality, and to check it, each system must have the instruments of social control. Forcing the deviants to subscribe to rules, least punishments to their actions become culminatively stringent. Social control tries to restore some sort of stability in the system. Neo-functionalism is concerned with equilibrium, but it is not broader than the concern of structural functionalism. Neo-functionalism does not believe that any system can ever be in a state of static equilibrium. It is always moving and partial. Moreover, the concept of equilibrium is to be regarded as a reference point for functional analysis. It does not describe the lives of individuals in actual social systems, which is perennially in action. It brings us once again to the point about neo-functionalism mentioned earlier. It is concerned equally with order and action. Of all the functionalists, it was Parsons' structural functionalism that exercised the maximum impact on later scholars, some of whom later became famous as neo-functionalists. The latter accept the traditional Parsesian emphasis on culture, social and personality system, which are vital to any society. These systems interpret one another, because of which they produce tension, which is one of the important sources of change and control. Further change occurs when cultural, social and personality systems are differentiated over time. This change does not occur because of conformity and harmony, but because of the rise of individualism and institutional strains. Neo-functionalism submits that in order to enrich our understanding of the processes of order and action in society, we should think of borrowing some from other theories and perspectives in sociology and other social sciences. Alexander and Colme have tried synthesizing structural functionalism with other theoretical traditions. To overcome the idealist bias in structural functionalism, neo-functionalism encourages materialistic approaches. To counter the structural functional tendency to emphasize order has led neo-functionalists to explore the theories of culture. Insights from approaches such as exchange theory, symbolic interactionalism, pragmatism, and phenomenology are being drawn to compensate for macro-level biases of the traditional functional approach. The future of neo-functionalism has been cast into doubt by the fact that Alexander in his book Neo-Functionalism and After has stated that he has outgrown a neo-functionalist orientation in his career. He says that one of his important goals was to show the importance of Parsons' theory. Parsons had built a theoretical scheme that was potentially capable of overcoming the contradiction inherent in classical sociology. But neither he nor any of his collaborators and students was able to take full advantage of the theory. Alexander saw his aim as that of developing the theoretical strengths that lay incipient in Parsons' work. Since he thinks that he has succeeded in this venture, his project of neo-functionalism is over. It will, however, Alexander says, keep on influencing his later thoughts and his present work on civil society. Now let us move to the next point, merits and demerits of neo-functionalism. Conclusion. Although some of the traits of what has come to be called neo-functionalism are found in the German interest in Parsons' work, this theoretical tendency is principally associated with an American sociologist, Jeffrey C. Alexander, and later his young collaborator Paul Colme. A restricted use of them neo-functionalism is also found in ecological studies, where it basically means assigning primary importance to techno-environmental forces in an analysis of the processes of cultural adaptation. Alexander does not seem to be happy with the use of the term neo-functionalism. He also thinks that the functionalism was not really an appropriate term to describe the Parsons approach. Parsons himself tried to discard the term structural functionalism for his approach, but he knew that it would continue to be used for his sociology. Some of his associates prefer to call his theory action theory. Alexander also thinks that notwithstanding the inappropriateness of the term functionalism, Parsons' sociology will be known in future by this name. Thus, not much will be gained by discarding the term. Rather, one should cling to it and redefine it. Instead of being a unified theory, neo-functionalism is a tendency characterized by the following propositions: an open and pluralistic description of society as a whole, an even-handed appropriationment when it comes to action versus structure or action versus order. Integration is viewed as a possibility. Deviance and social control are considered realities. Disconcernment between the personality, culture, and society. Differentiation is viewed as the central driving force producing social change. The development of concepts and theory is considered to be independent of all the levels involved in sociological analysis. There have been marked variation in the responses to the efforts of Alexander and others to revive functionalism. Some have found Alexander's account of the functional tradition as extremely vague. They also question the purported continuity between the functionalism and neo-functionalism, because neo-functionalism seems to include everything functionalism has been criticized as lacking. There are limits to the length to which any theoretical perspective can go in accommodating incompatible notions and yet retain its name and lineage. For some critics, the changes introduced in the structural functionalism are more cosmetic than real. Neo-functionalism is still imbued with the features that distinguish functionalism. For instance, the view that societies can be studied objectively continues to predominate. Individuals are still regarded as reactors to the system rather than dynamic and creative actors. Conflict is recognized but remains at the secondary place in the theory, and revolution is certainly not considered. So is not neo-functionalism old wine in new bottles. Alexander suggests that the sociology should be based on a post-positivistic understanding of science, which means that we can understand the world around us as much through theoretical explanations as through empirical inquiry. This view opposes positivism because it reduces theory to empirical data. In other words, for it, there cannot be a theory divorced from the empirical facts. Positivism makes a sharp distinction between the empirical observations and non-empirical propositions. The latter constitutes the realms of philosophy and metaphysics, thus deserving no place in the empirical science. Post-positivism submits that a theory can be discussed, examined, verified, and elaborated with reference to other theories rather than empirical research. In other words, the referent for a theory might be another theory rather than an ensemble of facts. Theories are viewed as if they represent the empirical observations. Alexander is critical of empirically based interferences in social sciences. One of the fundamental differences between the social sciences and natural sciences is that theoretical perspectives always permeate every work that social scientists do. Sociological theory, therefore, can be scientifically significant irrespective of its ability and capability to explain empirical observations. In future, Alexander thinks there will be a grand theory built on the premises of post-positivism. This theory will be multidimensional with respect to various polarities in classical sociological theory, such as micro-macro, order conflict, equilibrium stability, structure agency, etc. But even after its hybridization, drawing upon different theoretical perspectives, neo-functionalism will not be a distinct paradigm, much less a grand theory. In other words, skepticism prevails about the future of neo-functionalism. Now let us wind up the session, and we have come to the end of the unit. Thank you very much for engaging yourself with the self-learning podcast.